Αμέσως να ακούσουμε τον πρώην Υπουργό Εξωτερικών του Ισραήλ, τον κύριο Σλόμον Μπεν Νάμι. Είναι μια από τις πλέον ισχυρές προσωπικότητες του Ισραήλ, ο οποίος μάλιστα είχε τεράστια συνεισφορά για την επίτευξη διαφόρων σχεδίων για επίλυση του Μεσανατολικού, ο οποίος θα μας αναλύσει και τα αίτια και τα αιτιατά αυτής της σύγκρουσης, αλλά και τις ευρύτερες προεκτάσεις. Πάμε λοιπόν να ακούσουμε τον Σλόμον Μπεν Νάμι, με τον οποίο ηρίστο εμπαρόδο. Θα πρέπει να πω ότι και τους άλλους τους πήραμε πριν από ακριβώς 48 ώρες, διότι έπρεπε να γίνει μετάφραση και υποτιτλισμός. Ευχαριστώ λοιπόν. Πάμε στον Σλόμον Μπεν Νάμι. Professor, we are witness of a catastrophic war between Hamas and Israel. Is war a solution? Can the war bring about a solution?
Well, there are two ways I can answer this question. One is, what was exactly the alternative that Israel had after that savage attack by Hamas on innocent civilians, and the abduction of almost 250 civilians, among them babies and women and elderly people. What was the alternative? I know that people preach to Israel. I wonder what any other country would have done in a similar situation. I can only tell you what the United States did. I mean, it conquered Afghanistan and Iraq, and it produced hundreds of thousands of victims. I'm not condoning it. I'm just putting this into proportion. The second thing, you know, because nobody ever gave me an answer, those who criticize Israel, what would a proportionate answer would look like? Anyway, the second thing about whether war can produce any positive outcome.
Yes.
The history of the Middle East shows that it does. That, and not only the Middle East, it's all over the world. I mean, diplomacy nowhere has worked before war or the threat thereof. Diplomacy always worked only after major conflicts. And this is also the case here. If it were not for the Yom Kippur War, you might not have had an Israeli-Egyptian peace. The blunder of the Israeli leadership ahead of the Yom Kippur War had to do with the fact that they ignored the political signals coming from Anwar Sadat, and they eventually paid the same price that they would have paid before the war. So for the peace agreement. So now we are in a very dirty war with Hamas. Whether or not.
Yes, please.
Whether or not this produce any kind of political outcome, it is very, very difficult to see right now.
We're going to talk about this a little bit later. My question, which is very critical, and I would like to hear your analysis on the purpose of the brutal attacks of Hamas on October 7. What is your analysis? Why they did such a thing?
Well, they did it for a number of reasons. One is that I will tell you at least three reasons. One is that if you have a minute to spare, go and read the constitution of Hamas, and you will see that Hamas denies the very existence of the Jewish state and even the slightest remote right of Israel or for Jews to be on sacred Islamic land, as they would define it. So this is one fundamental reason. This is a war of annihilation that is in the constitution of Hamas. The second thing is more tactical, more practical. Hamas wants to assert its leadership, its hegemony in the national Palestinian movement. They want to displace the Palestinian Authority, to displace the PLO as ineffective,
Yes.
as collaborators with the occupier in their language, and be themselves the leaders of the national Palestinian movement. And I guess that in a way they have reached it in many ways, at least in the public sentiment, both particularly in the West Bank. Gaza, I don't know if they have a moment to think, I mean the population, whether they have a moment to think about
Yes.
these analysis, okay?
Yes.
The second thing is the exchange of prisoners. The prisoners are almost a constituent mythology, both in Hamas and the PLO, in spite of the dire economic conditions in the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority doesn't have particularly brilliant economic situation, far better than Gaza, but not particularly brilliant. Nonetheless, as a substantial part of the budget of the Palestinian Authority goes to the families of those terrorists that are in Israeli prisons, those that were condemned by Israeli courts for committing acts, some of them quite barbaric, acts of terrorism. So this is a mythology that is very central in the Palestinian narrative, as it were. So these are reasons that can explain why they did what they did.
Professor Ben Nami,
Yes.
to what extent the internal rivalries in Israel led to the present situation, and if I dare to say, to what extent the Prime Minister has any responsibility for the present chaos?
He has all the responsibility for it. He has all the responsibility. His leadership was won always by pitting Israelis against each other, inciting right against left. His judicial overhaul was utterly unnecessary. It divided the country. His leadership is not only one that is based on incitement and demagoguery, it is also one that has proved to be utterly ineffective. He is a lousy leader. He didn't see the tragedy coming. He built an entire strategy that the Abraham Accords have done away with the Palestinian problem. It doesn't exist. He said a week ago or a couple, before the war, 3 weeks ago, now it looks like eternity, he said to President Biden, the Palestinians do not have veto right on our rapprochement with Saudi Arabia. Well, it looks as if they have. Right. Now the Saudi case has been put on hold. So from every perspective, from the strategic perspective, from the domestic political perspective, from the military perspective, all the responsibility is on him. And of course, there are others that will have to share the responsibility, and they have come forward and assume it. The chief of staff, the chief of military intelligence. Only Netanyahu is clean, according to his rhetoric and that of his acolytes.
I will stick a little bit on that. Professor, Mr. Prime Minister has committed himself for a massive ground attack offensive against Gaza. We speak before about the purpose of the Hamas attack. What is the purpose of that, of the Israeli attack?
Well, whenever you quote Netanyahu said, Netanyahu didn't say, put a question mark. Netanyahu is an obsessive liar. nothing that he says should be taken at face value. Maybe there will be an invasion, maybe not, but not because Netanyahu said it. This man is an obsessive liar. So I think that, and then separate from Netanyahu, let us see what such an invasion could accomplish. I would not advise it. I think that what the IDF is doing now, that is incursions into Gaza, selective, calculated incursions, this is the sort of quotation mark invasions that I would not advise going beyond it, because it would be an untold catastrophe for the civilian population, and also for casualties among the Israelis, particularly when, again, now allow me to mention our Prime Minister, I hope not for too long. This man is in a war that he didn't plan, but once he is reacting, he doesn't have a political endgame in mind.
Okay.
Clausewitz told us lesson very simple. War doesn't make sense if it doesn't have a political objective. What is the political objective of this government? I don't know. If you have it, share it with me. I am not aware that they have a political objective. So,
yes,
presumably, Joe Biden has a political objective. He said it clearly. I want a political process. I want a two-state solution. I personally do not believe that this is feasible, but at least he speaks about some sort of political arrangements. Netanyahu doesn't have any political strategy in mind, because if he says, even today, he thinks he's obsessive with his political power base. Because if he says that he has a political objective, then his coalition will dissolve. He thinks of his personal political career more than about the nation.
Let me, at this point as well, to add something else that Mr. Prime Minister said, that from now on, in the Middle East, would never the same as it was before of this war. What does mean of that? Is it exactly what you said before?
Well, again, yeah, well, he likes bombastic declarations. Yeah, I assume yes, but not because he says it. I mean, things will change in terms of Israel and the Palestinians particularly. I believe that at some point it would be possible to restart the Abraham Accords, but Israel's neighbors, the members of the Abraham Peace Accords, would ask a political price to be paid. This may come in the form of the freezing of settlements, of some territorial arrangements in the West Bank, of a return, a possible return of the Palestinian Authority to Gaza instead of Hamas, but then this would require diminishing militarily, reducing dramatically the military capabilities of Hamas. Otherwise, it's not realistic to believe that the Palestinian Authority will be able to extend its faculties, its authority on Gaza. So I think that this kind of interim sort of political moves, this would be required by the members of the Abraham Accord as a condition for going ahead. The other question has to do with Israel's deterrence. I think that this would be something that Israel would have to think of it in a very serious way. In what way our response increases or does not meet the need for asserting our military capabilities in the region. This is a very tough neighborhood.
Okay.
In this tough neighborhood, there is not always sympathy with the weak, and they do not normally give a second opportunity to the defeated.
Okay.
Therefore, Israel needs to end this war not with a sense of not having shown convincingly its military capabilities. It is very sad to say it, but this is the kind of region where we live.
Okay. Professor Ben Nami, I have only some more questions, but unfortunately the time is only 3 or 4 minutes. The only question that I would like to have a quick answer. Do you see the possibility of a wider conflict in the area?
I see it. I see it definitely. In fact, you already have skirmishes and clashes along the northern border between Israel and Hezbollah. The fact that the Americans have moved their aircraft carriers to the eastern Mediterranean and are deploying anti-missile capabilities in the region is not in order to invite a war, but to deter both Hezbollah and Iran. But miscalculations can happen. The current skirmishes along the Israeli-Lebanese border can decline into an all-out conflict, even if both parties don't want it. Right now, what Hezbollah is trying to do is to show some sort of sympathy with Hamas. They are not really interested in an all-out war, but this can happen. And if it does happen, it will be a major cataclysm. We will see a broad regional war, probably with American participation, if the Iranians come into the conflict. So I think that there is such a danger evolving. Now, this is the way to interpret the visits to Israel of European leaders. They understand that this is not just about Hamas and Israel. This is about the realignment of allies and enemies, like in Ukraine. I mean, the very same front that was created in Ukraine, that is the US, NATO, Europe, facing Russia, Iran, and China, this is the same front that is developing now along the Israel-Gaza border. It goes beyond Gaza. It is Israel with the United States, NATO, if you wish, and the West facing a coalition consisting of Iran, its proxies in the region, Hezbollah, Hamas, and militias in Syria, plus, in fact, Russia and China. So this is the front, the same front that developed in Ukraine is now developing in the Middle East.
Okay, my professor, my last question, because unfortunately the time is so. Mr. Ben Nami, in Gaza we have the Hamas, in Israel Netanyahu, in West Bank the Palestinian Authority. What, on your opinion, would happen to them after the conflict? Will they exist the way as they're acting now?
Oh, no, I don't think that you can have business as usual after this war. Within Israel, you will see, once the war is over, massive popular demonstrations in order to topple Netanyahu, to get rid of this man that even today thinks how to perpetuate his power. So you will see a major domestic dispute, conflict within Israeli society. The second about if Hamas survives this war, I believe Hamas would continue being seen by the Palestinian masses as the representative of the Palestinian cause, and this will definitely do away with the chances of any sort of political movement. Whereas when it comes to the West Bank, I think that this would be the last days of the Palestinian Authority. I do not believe that they can survive. They can survive artificially. That is, if the United States and Israel and the Arab states around us give them the necessary support, but they would not have the trust of the Palestinian people. Just one last word. The reason that Mahmoud Abbas hasn't conducted elections in the Palestinian Authority for the last 20 years has to do with his fear of a Hamas victory in the elections. So imagine now if Hamas survives a war with Israel.
Professor Ben Nami, thank you very much for this interview, and hoping that we're going to have you again within these tragic moments, and we hope just to have at least peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yanis.
Thank you.